Okay. That's okay. I guess we hadn't really talked about anything yet anyway, so I'll post this half of the video. Although the question was posed in the first half, but not the question, but really, yeah. All right, so here's something about the way that I offer information that I just think is worth talking about for a second, because it's kind of like, sort of in relation to what Gene was talking about when he first mentioned the energy body. Didn't really know what to call it, and I can understand because people are trying to call these things so many different things, it just gets utterly confusing at a certain point. So I'm going to use binary to my advantage in this explanation. And we're going to just do the old finite and infinite. Finite is something that the human being thinks it observes. We think that we observe finite, but it's just finite to the relative nature of the human experience. We can only see so much, hear so much, taste so much, perceive so much. And so our experience is finite, not the universe itself. But that's okay. We can still work with that dynamic rather than trying to, it's not real. And it's like, yeah, I get it. We want to say things aren't real until you got hit by the bus and tell me that bus wasn't real. Tell me that it wasn't traveling and there wasn't a distance and there wasn't a you and a it. Well, there was, but we're all one. Well, one second. Coffee makes my nose run a little bit. All right, so now the finite side is, again, that's relative to the human experience. Finite doesn't really exist, just like empty space doesn't really exist. We've just made that up to further describe the human experience. If you walk into a room and there's nothing in it, you need a word for that. If you walk into a room and it has a ton of stuff in it, you need a different word for that because it's a different experience we're attempting to describe. So we've invented the word empty because our experience, we experience and we need a word for that. That room has nothing in it. This area has nothing in it. I don't see anything, so it must be empty. But this is where words exist, concepts exist, binary in nature. And that's all great, right? So that's the finite nature of things. Anything that we're talking about, if we're talking, we're using words. Words are held in a dictionary. Every language has a dictionary of some sort. That is finite. All of the words that exist in that language are held within that book, the dictionary. There's experience that has yet to be experienced that we haven't quite put words around yet. There are discoveries that haven't been discovered yet, so we don't have words for it yet. So we're constantly adding new words to the dictionary because we continue to refine our explanation of our experience. I like that, refining the explanation of our experience. That makes sense. Now, one thing that I've noticed throughout history is that human beings want to take that finite, breaking it down, million different pieces and apply it to the infinite. And when that happens, we end up with a lot of stuff. We end up with, how many gods are in the Indian Hindu system? The Hindu belief system? That's a lot of gods. That's a lot of stuff to remember. We've taken the infinite and Egyptians did it, people have been doing it for thousands of years. They try to take the human experience and apply it to the infinite. And that is called making God in our image, in our likeness. And then before you know it, God is a man in the clouds, judging us good versus bad. And okay, I get it, but it's not a very beneficial dynamic, to be perfectly honest. At least not for me. I'll say for me, it's a little bit weird. So what is weird about it? Why does it get weird? it gets weird because we're attempting to get closer to one, undifferentiated. And the closer that I get to undifferentiated, the less I'm going to be able to explain it, the less I have words to talk about it, which is why the Tao Te Ching begins. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. We're just talking about it. We just want to set that expectation right away that we're doing our best here. We're just giving some explanations, given the words and the language and the understandings and the knowledge that we have so far, and this is our best representation of it. People didn't do that. They took what was the best representation and they started to worship it as truth, universal truth. What happens when we do that? Well, we start to judge one another and we think that other people should be believing how we believe things. And then before you know it, we have holy wars and countries and, all of these different beliefs that aren't harmonious. They're fighting one another. Oh, mostly fighting one another. Sometimes very passively. Like it's like, oh, we accept everybody, but you can't do this, you can't do this, and you can't do this, but we'll accept you otherwise. Oh, and this, and this, and this. Can't do any of that. And it's like, oh no, so you're not accepting of me at all. You just want to accept me long enough to change me. So the biggest difference in the way that I present things and the way that things are often presented in the world is that the closer we get to infinite, I stop labeling it, judging it, comparing it, contrasting it, and dividing it. And that's why I call the energy body just the energy body. I don't really have a lot of different words that I want to call it. Ultimately, I divide things into 3 primary categories. Very simple to understand, but I would say that we're constantly interacting with this 3-part dynamic: seen, can I make that down? There's no. I don't know if that's a word, unseeable. So the idea here is that we have the unseen, and that's possibility. We can access the unseen. We can feel it, especially the wind for generations was relatively unseen. We would sometimes temperature variations creates fog, creates clouds, and we see the air. But in general, when a gust of wind hits you, you don't see it. But you feel it. So one cool thing about the human experience is that we can constantly explore the unknown, the unseen, and we can make it seen. How? By exploring, by looking at it, by engaging it, by perceiving it. Does that make sense? Well, so we're in a constant process of discovery, of exploration, of learning, and that is the constant evolutionary growth process. And as long as we're a species, we'll be discovering. We'll be taking what was previously unknown and unseen and making it known and seen. How do we do that? With information, the experience from other people, and personal experience together create knowledge. That's awesome. And fun. And that is when we're taking things and we're dividing it up and we're putting new names on it and we're compartmentalizing, categorizing. And that has a value to a point. As long as we know that this is just a description. This is just our best attempt to talk about it. But it's not an absolute representation. That's the error. The error is somebody gets a book and now all of a sudden they think that this book is an absolute representation of human history, the human, reason for being and everything else. And now before you know it, we have a book that is sacred. Or, when Long gave me this book from his Buddhist master, he told me not to fold the pages. He told me never put it in a book bag with other books. He said never put it face down, never let it touch the ground. And I'm like, homie, this came from a printing press. And I don't think the people who pressed this cared about anything that you cared about. This is a book. It is paper. It is print. And I can understand honoring it, valuing it, but I'm not going to treat it like some sacred, deity in of itself. That seems like attaching, clinging, trying to control. And I thought it was foolish. I'm like, I can see respecting a book because you don't want to keep rebuying it. But I think that it was getting a little bit into something that I didn't care to participate in. That makes sense? So I also accept that in general, human beings have limited perception. So I do not have echolocation like a dolphin. I do not see in heat, thermal, like a shark. I can't hear vibrational patterns from 10,000 miles away like a whale. I don't feel the Earth's electromagnetic field so that I can navigate from one continent to the other using just the electromagnetic field of the planet. I can't do any of that. Like, I don't have those senses yet. We'll see how I evolve. I don't have those sensory organs. I don't have a way to perceive those things directly. So I don't see it. And I don't know if the machines that we create that show us heat is the way that the shark sees the heat. I have no idea. That's the perception of the hawk. I can't jump inside shark's brain and see what shark is seeing. I can get a general idea, like this is what heat looks like versus cold, and we have blue to represent cold, red to represent hot. I get it. But ultimately, I have accepted, and this system reflects that the human experience in terms of perceptive ability is fundamentally limited. We have limited perceptive abilities. Again, I cannot navigate continents using the Earth's electromagnetic field yet. And I'm going to put yet at the end of everything, because that's the evolutionary aspect is, who knows? Maybe Gene wakes up one day and he has a new sensory organ and it's like, ooh, I can hear, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. So there is the seed, which is knowledge, information, experience from other people, and our own personal experience. We like to process that into language and divide it up so that we can share it and talk about it. Hey, that's fine. But then we also have the unseen, and that's what we haven't really wrapped our knowledge around yet. We haven't really experienced it yet for whatever reason. We haven't really created words around it yet for whatever reason, because we're constantly exploring this infinite universe. And maybe one day Gene will have new sensory organs, and now it's a whole new game. Now we're really, able to see different things, not better, not worse, just different aspects of the infinite. But I also accept the limitations of the human experience in terms that we're a biological entity that has a limited ability to perceive the world around it. It's fundamentally limited. We're not able to perceive every single thing in this infinite dimensionality, because that's the nature of perception. So there is the unknowable. And I can accept the unknowable. And I can accept the unknown. And I can accept the known. And I can work with those things. And I don't really look at any one of them necessarily as the truth, the light, the way, and the absolute representation. I'm able to suspend that because of the limited nature of human experience. I can suspend those types of absolutes. I don't indulge them as much. So the closer that I get to infinite in my descriptions, the closer I get to the unknowable or the unseen, the less I'm going to use differentiated words. I think it's erroneous to take something like that and think that we necessarily have to divide it up into 10,000 different things. Maybe Gene just loves doing that, though. That's his thing. That's his creative vibe, is to take human energy and to divide it up into 10,000 different categories. Fine, that's your thing. I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. I don't see any principle in the universe that says I need to know the 10,000 different manifestations of chi. For what? Maybe that's helpful to you. I think that that's way too much information for me to remember. I don't remember 2 things, 3 things. Be damned if I remember 10,000 things. Memories will process. I don't have that kind of time. So I call it the energy body simply to avoid that common error of over dissecting, over compartmentalizing and separating the infinite. I leave the unseen as just the unseen. It's the unseen for now. The unseeable, I can't even talk about. I'm not even going to talk about that. I can't talk about the unknowable. The hell? Like, I would just be making shit up. It's unknowable. That's why we call it unknowable. But the unseen, that's still an infinite potential that we can continue to explore and feel and know. So finite, we can talk about it, we can write about it, we can break it down into 10,000 compartmentalized sections of language and words, and that's fun. However, in my experience, the closer that we get to the infinite, it must be felt. It's not as talk aboutable. We can't create as much language around it yet because we have to experience, we have to fill up that 3 parts of knowledge. If you just experienced it for the very first time, you probably don't have a lot of information about it. Other people probably don't have a lot of information to share about it, so you can't get their experience. And maybe it's something brand new to you, so you don't even know how to put words around it yet. So it's very difficult to put it into that knowledge realm to where we can communicate it with other people. Does that make sense? So to avoid those common errors, the closer we get to the energy body, you got to feel it. We can talk about it a little bit in terms of how do you feel, but I'm not going to break it down. I'm not going to overanalyze it. I'm not going to tell you what it is and what it isn't, but I can tell you how to direct attention or other procedures, other ways for you to access it. What I love is that Gene was talking about ways to access it, ways that he was able to feel the energy body in his experience, and that's perfect. I mean, emotional memory, well, we feel it first, and then we're able to remember it and recall it more and more and more later. That's how that works. So I had a vision where I felt peace, and I'm like, oh, I like that. I like this. My mind feels naturally relaxed, and so my practice is easier feeling. I want more of that. I sensed it first, I felt it first, and then I got more and more and more and more familiar with the feeling. And now I can talk about it a little bit more. I have a little bit more information on it, a little bit more personal experience. You all have been doing it and sharing your experience with me, and we're really adding to our knowledge bank. It's really growing in this regard. So the more that we talk about hydrostasy, the more I'm just giving people places to put your attention so that you can feel the energy body yourself. We don't manipulate it. We don't try to control it. We don't try to name it. Naming it and compartmentalizing is a form of manipulation, judgment, and control, in a manner of speaking. I don't need to do that with the energy body. That is a part of the unseen. So I find it very beneficial to keep the categorization like that. That way I don't find myself erroneously trying to tell somebody about their energy body or tell somebody about the infinite that they maybe don't have any experience with themselves, because that is also erroneous. Does that make sense? Yes, Gene.
Just a quick question. Well, it may not be a quick question. I mean, it may be a quick question, but the answer may not be. The scene, I get that, finite, and the unknown, and then the unknowable. Do you see a boundary between the unknown and the unknowable, or do you consider the possibility that instances can drift across the boundary, they're unknowable, they're unknown now, but perhaps they're not unknown, perhaps they're unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
And what's unknowable could be in the condition of unknown, it just we haven't had enough information. Or do you have a boundary? And everything that's unknowable, we won't discuss it, we won't visit it, that's in one category. And all the things that we can possibly know, we don't know them now, but we can possibly know them. And that is in our imagination, at least what we think we can know. that's another step. So there is a definite boundary between unknown and unknowable
There is a
in your
boundary.
definition.
Yeah, there is a boundary, and it is a relative one, relative to the human being's ability to sensory perceive its experience. So, like I said, if all of a sudden you woke up one day and you could echo perceive, echolocation, vibrational location, what was previously unknowable to you has now entered the realm of unknown. You just don't know it yet. So it is a relative principle. The human species could continue to evolve, could continue to change over time, and we could continue to develop sensory abilities. Maybe we have them now and we're just not connecting to them as much. But really, the way that I divide this up is just so that we don't go down rabbit holes. Talking about the unknowable to me is stupid, because what are we talking? You don't know it. I don't know it. How can I see a boundary? I can't see a boundary between the unknown and the unknowable, because I don't see the unknowable at all. I don't know what I don't know. All that I know is I don't know what I don't know. That sounds like I'm talking in circles, but it's true. It's wildly true. So it's a relative thing, relative to our ability to perceive our experience. I do think, though, that there will always be an unknowable, because we're dealing with infinity. And so no matter how we evolve, there's always going to be some aspect of the universe that is unaccessible to us in that current stage, that current form, which is why the evolutionary process is infinite, because the unknown and unknowable is also infinite. So it's a constant thing. And that's why the universe is constantly getting to know itself better through us. That's how it's doing it. Now, when the human being attaches to the construct of self, it's no longer functioning that way. Most human beings are not functioning as if they were the universe, who is simply learning more about itself through the experience of that life being, that entity. When we acknowledge that actively as a point of attention, that's a game changer, and that's hydrostasy. And I'll talk about that. That's something that I do with my attention, is to engage that type of thing using different points of attention. So we are the boundary between unknown and known. That can be a little bit like, ooh, I see it. Like, I'm right on the tip of something, and then all of a sudden you create space and you have an aha. And now you can describe what was previously unknown. And guess what? The majority of people are going to reject it, because if it was something that was unknown being made known, it's truly creative. And things that are usually truly creative are rejected at first by the masses in general, because they get very habitual. This is the way, the sun comes up this way, sets this, it'll always be that way. And it's like, I don't know, maybe. So yeah, I think that the way that I have set this up is so that we don't go down these weird rabbit holes where now we're getting into these mystical things where we're trying to consciously access the unknowable and unknown. We don't need to do that.
So unknowable, the best we can do, if we chose to go there, is speculate.
You can't even do that. You can't even speculate on the unknowable. It's inaccessible to you. You don't know what you don't know, so how can you speculate on what you don't know? If you're using imagination, you're accessing the unknown. That kind of in between, Because if you're imagining it, then in some way you're creating a perception of it, So that's why when we imagine cellular devices with no cords, 20 years later, we're all walking around with cellular devices with no cords. It came through as an imagination thing. That's the thing about the unknowable. We cannot talk about it, even if you wanted to, even if you tried to. The Tao in itself, source, is unknowable in its totality. You can never know source in its totality because it's infinite. And by know, I mean sensory perceive and take it into where we can divide it up and talk about it. However, the unknown can be felt. We can feel the unknown. You cannot feel the unknowable because it's unknowable. It's not going to be in your experience, perceived at all in any way. I only use echolocation because that would be more in the realm of unknown, unseen. I don't see echolocation, but I know it exists. That's why we're talking about it. I'm going to tell you about the unknowable. That's it. That's all I got. How can I do that? I can't tell you about the unknowable. I can't even relate or make a connection to the unknowable because it's beyond my ability to perceive. Does that make sense? And that's just a dynamic of the human experience. It's fine. It's only ego when it creeps in. It's like, no, we can know everything. We can access everything. We are infinite in all. Okay, yes and no. Like, let's just accept, and this helps to navigate the island of the practical a little bit better too. So when I'm engaging the energy body, when I'm engaging the unseen, I just leave it like that. I'll always just leave it like that. I'm not going to divide it up. I'm not going to have hot chi, cold chi, warm chi, up chi, down chi, vital chi. No, no. I could see a benefit if a person is really interested in that. Like they just love that. That's their thing. That's their creative pursuit in this universe. It's not mine. So I don't really value breaking up the infinite. I would rather just experience it. And when I do try to express it, it is very artistic. Does that make sense? And I'm still talking about the unknown. I don't talk about the unknowable, other than to say I don't talk about it because I can't. I don't know what I don't know, so how can I talk about that? That makes no sense. I would say that the unknown is more accessible in your dream state and your vision state once you're able to condition those. And that is also a part of hydrostasy, is interacting with the vision and interacting with the dream state. Not absolutely, you have to want that. Hydrostasy doesn't give you things that you don't want. But. All right, so I think that's a good segue because Gene was using his energy body as a point of attention. So ultimately what that's leading to is paying attention to a feeling. It's not as much paying attention to a thought. It's not as much paying attention to a process or a definition. Instead, when we're paying attention to the energy body, and I loved how Gene described it as slightly outside of his body, slightly electrical in nature, and I think that's great. I think that there's different ways to stimulate that energy body. Different things will be happening in the physical body in relationship to it as well. So when Ida jumps in the sea and she just feels that rush of, it feels euphoric in a manner of speaking, that's the body's response to the energy interaction. If you paid attention a little bit more to the energy interaction and not the body response, it feels electrical. It feels like it's slightly outside of your body. And then the more you pay attention to it, you can feel that it's moving. Like everything else, it's in constant motion. And what's interesting is that the way that traditional Chinese medicine evaluates you, it would all be in relationship to how you're vibrating. So if Donna or Jean came into the clinic and I'm a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, I'm going to look at your vitality. I'm going to look at how you speak to me, how you answer questions. How does your eyes move when I move? What does your tongue look like? All of those different little things in relation to the energy that you're putting out, how you're interacting with your present moment. Does that make sense? Cool. So in general, you don't see your emotion, do you? Like you can see the results of it. Like if you're angry, you can look in the mirror and see that you're angry, but inside you don't see the electrochemical physiological responses occurring, do you? I mean, unless you're a scientist and you're looking at it, in someone else. And even then, it's an indirect way. The computer is the one that's sensing it, and we're just looking at the computer's expression of it, interpretation of it, which is also not it. And that's not really how it looks or feels or anything else. but you feel emotion, don't you? So we can feel the emotion, but we don't necessarily see it. That is another example of interacting with the unseen. So you can interact with your emotional body and you can interact with your energy body. And they do feel a little bit different. The energy body feels a little less personal. Mm, mm. No, it feels very personal, but it doesn't. Yeah, see how it gets? You get closer to talking about the energy body and the words just really break down. A computer sees it digitally and then will represent it in a way that we can also see, right? It has to display it in color or numbers or shapes or something that we can relate to. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to express it to us. So emotion can be felt. That's a part of the unseen. Your memory, that's a part of the unseen. Your imagination, that's a part of the unseen. I don't see your imagination unless you draw it. But even that, I don't know if that's what you actually imagine is what you put down on paper. You might not be a very good artist, and so what you put down on paper was totally different than what you imagined. I don't know because it's unseen. How can I know? I don't know. Does that make sense? Cool. So a lot of the things that we'll talk about as we get past T, as we start to move into the hydrostasy is all about feeling. What are we feeling? What is that emotional intelligence telling us? And then we go from emotional intelligence to emotional memory, where we're able to recall emotions as we see fit. And everything is in an emotional state. That's how we express things, is chemically. That's how we respond to things. We express our response through electrochemical, physiological, hormonal responses. Fine. Very complex system of stuff going on, and that's cool, but I can still work with that dynamic. Make sense? So hydrostasy would say that when Ida gets into the water, we can pay attention more to how that water feels on our skin, how that water invigorates us, the emotion that's created without judgment. Energy body feels like a part of the soup of things, no boundaries. Doesn't That's a great explanation. We can't talk too much about it either. You see what I mean? Don't need to do that. Energy body feels like ... How the energy body feels is also relative to you because you're perceiving in response to the energy body. Does that make sense? You're responding, your body responds to the unknown, the unseen. It does that all the time. You can walk into a room and all of a sudden you feel different. You don't know why. Your body is responding, your energy is responding to other vibrations, other things that are going on in that room that is just below the line of conscious awareness. It has fallen under conscious awareness, which 70% or more of our experience falls under active consciousness. It's higher for most people, honestly. Yeah. So that's where I avoid that trap, Ida, is telling you or defining for others how the energy body feels. But you'll know it when you feel it. Like Gene knows that feeling that's slightly outside of his hand, sure, it's interacting with his hand, right? It's there, it exists. What he's feeling is the energy body interacting with his hand, and then his hand is sending signals to his brain to tell him, like, oh, there's something out there. Like, I don't know what it is. I can't really define it per se, but I feel that slight energy right up. And actually, our instrumentation is catching up because we are actually able to perceive now the heart is creating an electromagnetic field. That is the unseen. That exists. It's slightly outside of your body. And our body can interact with that. And it can make the unseen felt. That's a part of known experience. Very difficult to talk about still, but we can experience it. Does that make sense? I would say, though, that there's a slight difference between the energy body itself and looking at your hand and saying, I have a hand. Introspective awareness is using the peripheral nervous system to sense your own body. And that's a step to feel the energy body. So by paying attention to your body, using your imagination, you can stimulate the energy body. So imagination can stimulate the energy body. Paying attention to your body helps you feel that infinite aspect, the unknown, the unseen, the energy body. Does that make sense? And it will feel a little bit different for everybody because it's being perceived. If you're perceiving something, that is the principle of the hawk. It is unique. It may be similar, which is why we can talk about certain things. But in a fundamental, absolute way, it is absolutely unique to the individual. Does that make sense? There's only one thing that violates, as far as I can tell, certain principles, and that is attention itself. It doesn't age. We share it. One of those things. It is moving, though. It's always moving. Attention is always moving. All right, is that helpful at all? I don't know. It's kind of a, yeah. All right, so Gene's going about his day, and we could talk a little bit about the four modes practice if you like. So the four modes practice is going to be the way that I deliver mindfulness to the masses. That simple. I think it's the most efficient way to talk about a bridge that will cross the divide between theory and application, because you're in all of those four modes throughout the day. So the four modes practice will look like this. And yes, the four modes practice, it's all of these practices are fundamentally to help you feel the infinite, help you feel the unseen, not the unseeable. You don't feel the unseeable. We don't even talk about that. We just acknowledge its presence in the mechanism of things. So the seen and unseen, though, that's what we're interacting with hydrostasy. We're constantly exploring our experience and taking what was once unseen and making it known to ourselves. But the four modes practice looks like this, in no particular order. So I call it the four modes practice. We don't really focus on the fifth. The fifth is kind of an in-between. You're kind of in between sitting and standing when you're kneeling. Like you're not really standing, but you're not really sitting. Yeah, but people don't do that all throughout the day, you know. So I've left that one out strategically, but it's still valid if you want to engage it as a point of attention when you're gardening or when you're playing catcher for the Chicago Cubs. You could sense into your body and do all your tricks of attention. So the four modes is standing, sitting, moving, and laying down. The first aspect of the four modes is a personal practice. You can begin your personal four modes practice right away. And the four modes practice on a personal level is broken up into two different methods, approaches, I guess. It's informal and formal. With T, especially with foundational practices, we focus on almost informal entirely. And yes, the transitions between the two, that's important as well. So we pay attention to transitioning from one state to the other, because that's usually where we lose our structural integrity. Why is structural integrity important? So the energy body can flow more smoothly. Why do we want the energy body to flow more smoothly? Because that is the source of health. That is the source of connection to the unknown and the constant exploration. When we stop doing that, when we go away from that connection, when the energy isn't flowing as well, we get stuck, we get sick, we get attached, and we stop exploring the unknown. Now all of a sudden we know everything. And I'm gonna tell you about this, and I'm gonna tell you about that. Before you know it, I'm telling you how you should live and how you should do things. And then before you know it, heaven forbid, I'm offering advice that you never even asked for. That's called preaching. I do my best. I am not a minister. I am not the minister of mindfulness. I don't want to preach to people. I have better things to do, such as anything. All right, so the four modes practice, first of all, is informal. Take it with you. You stand throughout the day. You walk throughout the day. You do all of these things, and you can take the points of attention and interject them into all of these four modes. We're doing the same thing that we've always been doing. We have a toolbox of points of attention. I can give them to you, or you can create them on your own. That's fine. Especially in foundational practices in tea. Tea is pretty creative on your part. I'll give you some ideas, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Hydrostasy, I will. These are the points of attention that are a part of the hydrostasy approach. You're either doing them or you're not. If you're not, fine, I don't care. But if you want to do hydrostasy, you have to do these points. All that makes sense? So the formal four modes practice would be, so Gene has been doing it throughout the day. He played some golf and that's moving. He's in between shots and there's a little bit of standing. He has to drive or ride on the cart, so there's a little bit of sitting. Probably not a lot of laying down unless he slips on a banana or something and finds himself on his back. And then I do recommend some smooth breathing before you get up. Yeah, or a golf ball nobody yelled for and he got hit with the golf ball. So hopefully he's not laying down on the golf job. But the other three modes are very likely in play. And he has an opportunity to create an informal practice around those modes of human modality, if you will. Does that make sense? Four modes. Informal. Formal would be, well, after golf, Gene has noticed that he could be a little bit stiff, a little bit tense. The muscles have been working. We've been walking, we've been swinging, probably been doing a little bit of talking. So we've been, giving out that energy as well. That's fine. But maybe Gene finds it beneficial to do a little bit of counterbalancing and go back into a little bit more stillness, a little bit more relaxation. He wants that energy body, which is really excited and flowing really quickly, to be a little bit more even and smooth now, a little bit more natural. And so he goes into a formal four modes practice. And that would look like he sits in a particular way, does a particular thing at a particular time. Maybe he uses a chair, maybe he sits in full lotus, maybe he levitates several inches off of the ground. I don't want to judge Gene. I don't know what he's capable of. But then maybe he does a little bit of sitting, and then he does a little bit of standing, and then he does a little bit of moving meditation. That would be a formal meditative practice, a formal four modes practice. Does that make sense? The points of attention are identical. The same points of attention that he had while moving, he can have while sitting. The same points of attention he had informally, he can have formally. And that's the way I offer the system. All the points of attention that are offered are done throughout. Does that make sense? So defocused vision, I'll do that informally and formally. It's the same points of attention. So when I'm standing in line waiting for a latte, I'm literally doing the same thing as when I'm standing doing my formal Zen Zhuan meditation. My golden line is set. I'm using peripheral vision. I'm expanding into the environment, paying attention to the feeling of the energy body move. I'm doing all of those things, whether I'm waiting for fried chicken, whether I'm paying my taxes, or whether I'm in a full lotus posture on the ground with incense and beautiful music. Same thing, same points of attention. Why? So I can remember. I didn't want to create 4 modes with 4 completely different things of attention, because that's just more stuff we have to remember. Create your toolbox, and that toolbox goes with you in all 4 modes of the 4 modes practice. Make sense? And now what I'm still developing and still working on, though, is the assisted or shared. I'll start with shared. Or actually, I think guided is a better word. A guided practice would be Gene and I decide that maybe he's got a big day coming up, or maybe he had a big day and maybe we didn't navigate it as elegantly as we could have. That's fine. We've accumulated a little tension, a little bit of stress in the body. We're not even feeling the energy body right now because we're too stressed. The energy's just not moving to the point where we can feel it. It has to move fluidly. It has to gain that visceral, thick quality. The more that it does, the more that we feel it. If it's plugged up, no. If it has all of these little areas where the energy can't flow, we won't feel the energy body, which is why the vast majority of the human population is ignoring the unseen while in favor of thought. And that is a huge, huge issue with human evolution. We're actually not going to be able to evolve in the same way. We're not going to change over time in the same way if we don't pay attention to our energy body or the unseen aspect of the human experience. We have to acknowledge both. Balance is the principle. So the guided 4 modes practice, Gene signs up for a one-on-one and we're on the internet. He's there, I'm here. I don't have to do it, but I would say, all right, Gene, we're going to start in a standing meditation. Go ahead and stand where you are. You want your feet to be about hip width, not too far out. We're not going to think one iota about depth. Knees bent. Are your knees locked or are your knees bent? If they're bent, that's all the depth we're looking for in this standing meditation. You're good. And we're going to begin by putting both hands over the dantian. Elbows feel heavy, slightly tucked behind you. You feel the chin and the rise in the crown. The chest is square. The dantian is full. My golden line is established. I feel the energy center in the palms of my hands, and I put those over the dantian. Smooth breath. Feeling into the body. Well, that's just the standing portion. Next, I'll have Gene sit down, and then I'll have Gene do some moving meditation. And then we could end with some laying down meditation and feeling into the meditative breath. That is a guided 4 modes practice. I think that could be wildly beneficial for somebody for 30 minutes to just enter a one-on-one type of session and just follow. And I wouldn't be doing it with you because I can just talk you through it. Does that make sense? That's a guided 4 modes practice. And we'll hit all 4 modes. If we're on the internet, I would recommend, I don't even have to see you lay down, but you do need a place to lay down. So that's kind of the thing. You just need enough space to be able to lay down. If you have enough space to lay down, then you typically will have arm's length to do a little bit of movement, and you'll have somewhere to sit. You can use a chair in the beginning. We're not just going to go in the full lotus posture or anything like that. We'll work up to that the more that we do the 4 modes. Or we won't. You'll use a chair your whole life. That's fine too. We're not trying to impress anybody with our full lotus, posture. Does that make sense? Okay, so the next aspect of the 4 modes practice is the assisted. Assisted 4 mode practice can only be done in person. The assisted 4 modes practice is, Gene, let's go for a walk. Where are we going? Doesn't matter. What are we going to talk about? Nothing. I'm going to tell you where to put your attentions and let's go do it together. And then as we're walking, I stop and I stand and I look out. And then I tell Gene what I'm doing with my attention and I invite him to do the same. And then he does the same. Or we're in a little bit more of a clinical atmosphere and we're in a room. In that room, I'll have him stand. I'll play some nice music, put on a little incense so the room smells nice. I'll give him a nice maybe it's like a robe type of thing so that there's nice softness on your skin that you can pay attention to. And I'll talk him through his points of attention in the room. The laying down portion, well, you could lay down and you could do yin yoga, you could do acupuncture, you could do a massage of some sort, and that would be somebody assisting another person in their foremost practice. And then before you know it, they leave the in-person session feeling bright, feeling ready to go. The energy is more smooth, and now they're set up for their own foremost practice. That makes sense? And all too often with acupuncture or really anything, people come in and they just expect this procedure to do everything for them. Oh, I got this massage from Jean. I'm good now. Like everything is fine. It's like if you go back to the same patterns of thinking and behaving, you're going to accumulate all the same tension, and it's not going to ever get any better long term. You're just going to keep coming in and getting a band-aid, which is okay. I don't want to judge. If I can offer a band-aid, that's better than offering nothing, because at least you have an opportunity. But what's great about the four modes practice is you can take it with you just as much as you can do it individually. So the more that Gene comes in for an assisted four modes, the more he's automatically learning how to do it on his own. And I will make that gentle suggestion, Gene, every time you're walking, standing, or laying down, you can do this. And Gene's like, oh, I could. And then before you know it, Gene is coming in for an assisted, or maybe signing up for a guided, but he's really learning how to do it on his own. And eventually he won't need the guided and the assisted, unless there's an extenuating circumstance. Like maybe he drove 8 hours to go see a family member. There is nobody really on earth who's going to be able to sit for 8 hours and accumulate no tension. It's an imbalance. It's not natural. Now, if he's doing his practice, he's going to accumulate less tension than he would if he was thinking and doing all of those things. And that is the four modes practice. The four modes practice is introduced in basic mindfulness, the foundational practice, and then it's carried out through tea and hydrostasy. That make sense? That is the bridge that helps cross the divide between theory and application. Where is your mind? Did you put it there in these four modes? Easy. We really set it up for somebody so that it's very clear and that we can really explain what they're doing with themselves. And then that would be the four modes practice. Any questions about that? So if it's a foundational practice, we're probably not working with many points of attention. We're kind of just starting to get used to it, right? So maybe we're paying attention to our feet. Maybe we have a couple points of attention written down. Chances are in your foundational practice, you do not have a very diverse toolbox. Maybe you're just using it for a battleground. Like you have a big interview and you just want to use the mindfulness practice for that. That is the foundational practice. A person can just play with it. They can just dip their toes in it. Fine. T is embodiment. Embodiment starts to get with the redirection aspect of thought. Foundational doesn't. I do not talk about cognitive redirection therapy in the foundational practice. It doesn't interact with thoughts at all. Some people don't want to. They haven't quite realized that they're not their thoughts. There are literally billions of people out there who are completely identified with thought as who they are. That's why the power of now would still blow their mind. So foundational practice is there for that. Embodiment is when we do start to work with, if we're embodying mindfulness, now we really need to stop being passive to unproductive thinking. And we need to redirect it back to the practice. That's T. Hydrostasy is we've been doing this for a very long time and we're starting to feel it all. Well, let's start paying attention to the feeling and using points of attention to help evoke, I could say, or align to certain feelings. That makes sense? That's easy. And that's this whole practice. That's it. That's all I'm offering. But there's still quite a bit there. I mean, when we talk about tea and a part of tea and things like that, warrior training, all of those things are still there. It is just wildly organized now. It's incredibly clear. And I've been giving all of this information to different people who have no knowledge of what we do here. And they've been picking it up and running with it. People who, I've been working with someone who, for example, trains police. I've been working with somebody who is a long-term physical practitioner of the arts. I don't know, like I don't know what else to call it. Just different things: yoga, meditation, combat, all of those different things. And they love the organization of this system. It's very clear, it's very organized, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to do, at least in the beginning. You kind of get it. Embodiment, it's not gonna be easy if you're not dedicated to it. That's why a person has to have the unbending desire to feel peace. If that's not there, embodiment will feel like work, and eventually we'll go, why are we doing this? What else would you be doing? All right. Well, I think that covers Gene's. He kind of initiated the discussion. This is practical mindfulness. So there's so many ways that we can practically take the four modes with us throughout the day. You're going to be standing somewhere. You're going to be sitting somewhere. The voice of power is designed to talk yourself through your practice. There's three primary aspects to the voice of power. A mantra. A mantra could be very specific, something that you intended in advance. You could write it down on a note card. However, there's another way to access the voice of power, and we call that productive self-dialogue, telling yourself true things. It could be a little bit more unique to the situation. For example, everything is working out for me may not be the mantra of choice when someone's punching you in the stomach, because it's not working out for you. Nothing right now is working out for you. You are taking physical abuse. So stop you telling yourself that you don't believe it. It's just you're literally just pushing air around. It's meaningless. But in that situation, a more situational mantra could occur, such as, I don't have to take this. I can move, I can leave, I can yell, I could scream, I could run, I could do these things. Right? And then it starts to access what I call intelligence. Intelligence does not require information or experience from others or your own experience. You can access intelligence and create something brand new. And that will come to you as a feeling. All of it comes to you as a feeling, but you're getting used to paying attention to your energy and your energy body, and you know when things, and you're like, oh my gosh, ooh, I have an idea. Gene's like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know yet. Give me a second. Okay, I got it. Let me write it down so I don't forget. That is accessing infinite intelligence. You're walking past a dark alley, and all of a sudden you get this feeling up your spine, and you're like, I'm going to go down the more illuminated path. Could be wrong, could be right, doesn't matter. I'm going to listen to that energy. That is intelligence, potentially speaking to you through the ether. And it doesn't have to be translated into words. Not absolutely. You probably will. And when you do, I call it the voice of power. So we could use the voice of power with our modes, with our practice, put it all together, and now we're embodying mindfulness all the time. If you are not intending your points of attention in advance, I can almost promise you that you are hustling yourself. And I'll drop out of the sky and I'll be like, Ida, where is your mind now? And you'll be like, I was listening, I was feeling into the presence of my being in the moment. And I'll be like, Ida, I'm gonna come back in 30 minutes. Let's have a better answer. So in this practice, foundational, definitely in T, your points of attention must, or you're doing something different, it's not this practice, be intended in advance. Because people are still hustling themselves. The reason is because when you intend it in advance, it can feel like work because you're not used to doing it. And sometimes when things feel like work, people get in the habit of not wanting to do it, and then they reject it. And that's on you. That's a habit. That is the third destroyer, the habits you've created already. Any questions? So that covers a lot of material. How do we intend our points of attention in advance? Write them down somewhere. Get a tattoo. Have a best friend remind you of your point of attention, but intend it in advance. And then you'll see the difference between floating about through your day and sometimes lightly touching points of attention and truly intending it in advance and holding it throughout your day. You can alternate through different ones, assuming that you've intended them all in advance. You can intend it in advance and never touch on it because you had 20 and you only touched on 15. Fine. That's okay too. What else? How else can we practically apply our mindfulness? Yes, Gene.
Yeah, some time ago, I don't remember, it could have been a year or 2 years ago, you mentioned hustling yourself with points of attention and finding them as the day progresses. And you said something about creating them in the morning, even before you get up out of bed, creating the points of attention. And that's worked for me. The days that I remember to create them right away seem to me to be better days than the ones that I make up after breakfast or after a cup of coffee. Oh, I need my points of attention. What'll it be? And then something catches my attention and I put that on my list. It doesn't work as well as before I even start the day, deciding what they're going to be.
Yes. And there's reasons for that. The primary reason is because if you've intended it in advance, then you know if you're doing it or not. You can't hustle yourself that way. You woke up this morning and said, today I'm paying attention to shadows and reflections. And then at the end of the day, you're like, holy shit, I didn't pay attention once to shadows or reflections. You didn't really do your practice. Not really. Maybe you did some points of attention. Maybe you did some quasi-pay and you felt okay today. That's all fine. Did you engage your four modes deliberately, intentionally, and willfully? If the answer is no, then you're just being basically mindful. Maybe. I don't know. Chances are you don't even know because you're not paying attention. That makes sense, right? You do have a better chance of not hustling yourself if it's intended in advance, especially in the morning. That's a great one. I like to just refer to my note card ones. So I have a note card around each stage of the practice. And then I just take my note card with me throughout the day and I remind myself of these different points. And I have such a diverse toolbox. Who remembers that phrase? Diversify your toolbox. If you go into it with 3 points of attention and you end up in some scenario that you didn't plan for, you might not have the tools that you need to access the moment the way that you want to the degree that's necessary to adapt. So I recommend a very diverse toolbox. In hydrostasy, I give you every single one of those. You don't need to even think of them on your own. I will tell you all of these places that we can put our mind. In tea, I'll give you some principles and you go do it yourself. You tell me. I'll give you some ideas. You try them, don't try them. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but it is not of significance to me. And I think that offers something for everybody. The foundational practice, somebody who just wants to dip their toes. Embodiment, somebody who wants to embody, but they don't really want to be told what to do. You know, I kind of want to figure this out on my own type of thing. Hydrostasy is okay. I'm really liking this. Where can I put my mind to help create these feelings of balance? The timeless nature of infinity. How do I feel the baseline of appreciation or happiness? How do I engage the curiosity, the humor, and all of these things, but without laughing at other people's misfortune? You know, why is that funny? Why is somebody being annoyed funny? Why is somebody being launched in a porta potty, 75 feet in the air? Why is that funny? I'm not going to tell you. All right, well, I think that's good, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to talk about. I have an acupuncture session. So acupuncture is an excellent opportunity for me when I'm laying on the table to do my practical mindfulness. I do all of my laying down points of attention when I'm receiving acupuncture. The more that I engage my practice, I feel that I'm giving the acupuncture the opportunity to work with that long COVID, because I've had a little bit of a lung issue ever since I had that flu in February 2020. And I've stopped interacting with my lungs. I don't smoke anymore. I don't dry or vaporize nearly as much. I maybe will once or twice, throughout the week, but I'm not really doing it all that much. Behavioral change is a part of hydrostasy, by the way. But that's my practice. That's where I'm at with my practice. Behavioral change, feeling into how things feel, and if they don't feel good, there's a reason for that. If telling Gene a lie doesn't feel good, there's a reason for that. Why am I focusing on myself to the point that I would say something untrue to him? Inner guru would say that that's just an unhealthy attachment on myself. I'm just thinking about myself again. And I don't like that. I don't want to do that. So eventually that behavior falls into the category of avoid, doesn't feel good. And so hydrostasy works with behavioral change because you're feeling your experience and you know now what is out of alignment because you're creating space. Sound good? A complete mindfulness system. Isn't that nice? Full of techniques, full of bridges to cross the divide. There's theory, there's philosophy, there's roots, there's origins, and ultimately there's a way for a person to do it and to remember it and to advance it and to make it their own eventually. So I think that this is one of the most complete mindfulness systems that I personally have ever come across. All right. Any final questions before we head out of here? What are you doing today? Is there anything, any points of attention, anything going on? If this was a one-on-one, did you wake up and intend your points of attention? Have you checked into your 4 modes practice? Is your voice of power directing towards the practice, or are we just hustling ourselves, expecting? So maybe today we felt a little peace, and we're just expecting to float on by in peace. Well, good luck with that. Good luck floating about your day in peace without the practice. It might last, it might not. I think you're gambling. So I would recommend writing down your points of attention, making sure that throughout the day we're talking ourselves into our practice. And if a thought is repetitive, same words in the same order, if a thought is habitual, which is the 3rd destroyer, the habits you've created already, you're in the habit of responding this way. You're in the habit of getting defensive. You're in the habit of thinking you know everything. You're in the habit of interrupting people when they talk. You're in the habit of thinking when other people talk. Those are all habits that you've created already. You're in the habit of talking yourself out of doing things to the point where you never do the things that you want to do. You're not lazy. You're in a habit, a habitual pattern of talking yourself out to the point where now you don't even really need to talk to yourself. You just don't want to do it, so you don't do it. But you know that you want to, and now there's a disconnect. All that makes sense? So I would recommend having a mantra. I would recommend having the mantra support your 4 modes practice. Maybe even having somebody help you with accountability, an accountability buddy. I can do that for you in mentoring. The mentoring is an accountability buddy. All right. I have my practice on my note card. On my note card, the first thing that I've been doing every single day as a part of my practice, and I shared it with Ida yesterday, is to create the baseline of appreciation. Now, that doesn't include talking to myself as much as it used to. I can just look at something and just feel the appreciation, like, I love my books. I'm so happy to have reading materials right there I'm going to take a shower in a few minutes. It's so nice to have hot water falling out of the wall. I used to say these things as a part of a voice of power. I don't have to as much anymore. I just look at the water and I feel the appreciation. I look at the sun and I feel the appreciation because I am creating a baseline of appreciation, which feels like contentment which feels like Thich Nhat Hanh's definition of happiness. And I'm not changing an emotion. So I'm not like, I feel sad, so I must feel happy. No, I'm just going to feel happy because I can. I can intend that emotion. That is called deliberate modulation. That has always been a part of the practice since day one. But that's more a part of hydrostasy and how I deliver deliberate modulation. The reason I do it later is because heaven forbid somebody think that deliberate modulation is changing how you feel. Because then we'll get into that trap of trying to control, manipulate how we feel. Somebody close to you has transitioned and you feel sad. Maybe you even feel angry about how it happened. It is erroneous to say, oh, I should be feeling happy. I want to feel happy and excited. I want to be on a high-flying disc. What? Why? Who told you that that's appropriate? Why do you think that's appropriate? Maybe how you feel is how you feel. And we can just get out of our way and let that change on its own back towards inspiration. With points of attention, of course, that doesn't just happen on its own. So there's reasons why things that are in hydrostasy are not touched on until I know a person is doing the practice. So if I've never met Jerry and Jerry's like, Ernest, teach me hydrostasy, no, I can't. How do I know I can't? Like, I don't know what you're doing with your mind. So I can't teach you hydrostasy at all unless you have a foundational practice and a T practice in place. Can't skip steps. Questions, comments, concerns, anything else before we head out? I have 2 videos to post. I have Tuesday's video and today's, so I'll post both of those today. I did my homework in the morning. That is my new technique. As I wake up, I do my homework because that's the thing I want to do these. So I do it first and I get it out of the way without resistance. And then the rest of my day, I just get to, that feeling of I've done my homework already. How did I do that? Why did I start doing that? Because I don't like the feeling of not getting my homework done. I don't like the feeling of all day thinking about not getting it done and, oh, I got to do it. So I just wake up, I'm in the least amount of resistance. I engage my practice. I sit at the computer. I do the stupid post, the discussion post. I make a response to somebody else's post that I don't care about, and I'm going to do it all without resisting, without trying to control. I just do it in the morning, get it done. That's a part of my 4 modes practice. That's a part of my interacting with my own life experience based on feeling, because I don't like that feeling of not getting my homework done. I don't like that feeling of getting a bad grade. I don't like that feeling of something looming over me all day. So I learned that if I do it at the beginning of the day, just get it out of the way, I have all this space. Isn't that nice? That is called learning, growing, evolving. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Mike? Aw, you just got here. We're all done though. Unless you have a question, comment, or concern. Okay. Yes.
Well, made it.
What did you say? Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you. Well, yes. Very good, Mike. Nope. That's okay. Just if you want, you can watch the replay. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can just send them to me. We can talk about them next week. On Monday, we have that introduction. It's the foundational practice. We're almost done with all that. I think that's week 3. And then we have the structure. We talked about the feet. We talked about the legs, kind of went up into the body a little bit. And we'll continue that. That structure is maintained throughout the entire practice so that the energy can flow smoothly. That's the idea. If we're all crunched up like this, the energy just isn't going to flow. It's a physical thing. And then again on Thursday, we'll have practical mindfulness. If you have one-on-ones in between that, I will see you in our one-on-ones. If you'd like to do a one-on-one and you haven't done one in a while, you can have one for free because you keep coming to the group study. Group studies, you get free one-on-ones. If you want one-on-ones every week, that's the private student, $75 a month, but you get one private session a week. Eventually, I'm going to add the guided 4 modes as well. And that would just be up to you. You can have one a week or 0. It's just, use those as you see fit with private student. But private students soon will include a guided 4 modes practice as you see fit. Up to probably like 2 or 3 a month. I'll figure that out. But I want them to be in there. Okay. Well, I will see you all together again on Monday, and I'll see you individually between now and then. Questions, comments, please let me know. That's what Thursday's for. All right? Okay. I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for hanging out. Bye, everyone.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye, Mike.
Bye. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
You too.